All right, so, well, let's take a look at some of the economic implications of that news, and we're joined by Clifford Bennett, Chief Economist at ACY Securities. Clifford, good to see you again.
Good morning, Andrew. Nice to be sitting down with you.
Indeed. Let's take a look at the COVID situation. How do you assess it globally, and then I guess juxtapose that with what's going on in Australia, particularly as far as the vaccine rollout is concerned?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. There's something there that people aren't really taking into account. We saw it in the Seychelles in a small example where they had the highest vaccination rate in the world, but they still had another surge of COVID. We're now seeing it in Russia on a grander scale. I'm not sure, as much as we want to believe that the vaccination is a silver bullet, I'm not sure it is. And so as this virus mutates and everything, I'm not trying to sort of scare anyone. I think the vaccination process will continue to have a big favourable impact on economic activity, but we shouldn't see it as a perfectly 100% silver bullet, perhaps in the way that many people are referring to it. In other words, I think markets should be focused on other economic assessments at the moment and not just on how many vaccinations are happening in a country, because we may see that we just can't get to herd immunity in any major economy given the logistic nature of rolling these vaccinations out.
All right. But are you confident in the vaccination rollout in Australia at the moment?
It's interesting. I was really quite amused by the Prime Minister sort of wanting to follow the US example and put a military general in charge of a health process. I'm not sure that was totally necessary, but it was certainly entertaining. But it says a lot about how it is a logistical nightmare. It is a difficult process. And nothing is straightforward with this whole pandemic situation. And I think we are going to have an effective vaccination rate in Australia, but what is effective, I don't think it will be to the degree of herd immunity where everyone can resume perfectly normal lives. I think what we'll see is what we're seeing in New South Wales now, occasional outbreaks, absolutely fantastic by the New South Wales government in terms of the follow-up and contact tracing processes, and that's what we should really be looking for to complement the vaccines. And I think that will keep things under control.
But of course the problem is, I mean, while New South Wales keeps its borders open, even when you get outbreaks in other states, many of the other states don't. No. So how do you solve that problem? And the impact is obviously that's a problem.
Yes.
And then you haven't even spoken about the international border and trying to get people back into the country.
Well, I was moving house from the Gold Coast to Sydney over the weekend, Andrew, and I had to race up on Friday before the new embargoes on people came into effect. So Queensland's very quick, Western Australia's very quick to close their borders. I guess to their credit, they have had low COVID rates, but I think probably the New South Wales model is the one that eventually the whole of Australia will have to adopt. Whether you have the political will to do that in WA and Queensland particularly, and even in Victoria, which is also quick to close, or has been in recent times, remains to be seen. But I think we do have a working model there now to move forward with.
All right, let's focus on New South Wales. I was just taking a look at the budget details there. Clearly, the state benefiting from the housing boom at the moment, given its coffers and the amount of revenue it's getting from stamp duty.
That's right. Bring in the stamp duty and give the public servants a pay rise. It seems to be. There's a little bit of look after ourselves, but let's face it, I think in all the emergency services, they probably need a 25% pay rise anyway, the police, ambulance, fire. So hopefully a lot goes to them. But I think it is a very good budget. I think it's a progressive budget. I think it will keep the economy well supported and humming along. And I think the idea of the electric vehicles, removing that cost there, is going to have a big impact, actually. And it will also justify the necessary sort of infrastructure cost of putting in the power recharge stations for electrical vehicles to have more electrical vehicles on the road. So I think that's a big positive.
All right, just before you go, I do want to get your view on the Fed. Obviously, a lot of Fed speakers this week. We've seen, in fact, last time we spoke last week, this is before it all unfolded, clearly, and the severe market reaction we've seen. How are you looking at the Fed stance at the moment and the rhetoric you're hearing from?
I think Jerome Powell, the Fed chair, is struggling with his messaging at the moment. He's trying to keep both sides of the argument happy. He's sort of pursuing an appeasement policy publicly. But I think behind closed doors, he's extremely concerned about inflation. And I think the big error, and probably the big risk economically that a lot of people aren't taking into account, is the Fed could be very late in controlling inflation, and having an out of control inflation situation in the US moving forward over the next 2 to 3 years could be the worst possible economic outcome.
All right, the US dollar, it's appreciated significantly just over the past couple of days.
Yes.
What direction are you seeing?
Well, on
that
your
at the
show on Friday morning, you know, it's very bearish for the Australian dollar, and it certainly had a big fall, but markets are very volatile. So we're going to see big swings in equities and in currency markets. But I think for the moment, people are going to lean slightly towards the US dollar safe haven argument a little bit. Certainly Europe's going to be late in coming online. I always call the United States the hare and Europe the tortoise. So the Europe will slowly get moving. The United States is going to be ahead. I think probably with the outlook for the Fed hiking earlier, that will be US dollar supportive overall.
Clifford, great
Thank
you
you,
can join
Andrew.
us from ACY. Thanks so
Pleasure.
much.
Thank you.